23 Dynasty rookie rankings. Let's get right into it. Obviously, first one, no question. It's easy. Player number 1 off the board is going to be Bijan. Be very surprised in your draft if it isn't. I think it's just... Come on. It's Bijan. His floor is so much higher than the rest of these round 1 rookie draft picks, and his ceiling is still immensely high. Especially going 8 overall in the draft, he's Bijan. Don't overthink it. At 2, though, I have what has become surprisingly consensus in this draft, which I'm pretty surprised by, Anthony Richardson. Now, I love Anthony Richardson. The rushing potential is off the charts, and he got top 5 capital, which means even if he isn't really working out as an NFL quarterback, we're probably going to get 4 seasons of Anthony Richardson being the starting quarterback for the Colts, and he's going to run like crazy. That's all you need to know. Rushing quarterbacks are amazing for fantasy. I don't really have to expand on that too much, I hope. But what I am surprised by with this is outside of 10 team, I'd probably lean Young. Like in 8-man or 10-man dynasty, the pick is clearly Richardson to me because of that ceiling. Because your competition base is smaller, you're going to have an overall better roster, which makes those ceiling players, those high ceiling players, more valuable. But when we get to 12-man and up, I get AR has that high ceiling, still very valuable in those leagues. But in 12 and 14-man SuperFlex Dynasty leagues, I feel like you are kind of maybe better served taking the floor of Young or Stroud. I personally lean Young. It's a coin flip between them. But I'm very surprised that even in what seems like a lot of higher player leagues, larger leagues, AR is still the consensus 2. And I think if you're in one of those 12 or 14-man leagues, you really got to consider whether your team is best served going AR or a safer option like Bryce Young. And so I already kind of gave it away there. At 3 and 4, Young and Stroud, I give the slight edge to Young just because I think he's better. But I'm no quarterback scout. If you like Stroud, take Stroud. I would have I would have definitely liked Stroud a lot more if the Texans didn't trade away all that future draft capital for Will Anderson. Because then the main knock you would have against Bryce Young is he can't be surrounded by talent in future drafts, at least for a little bit, because the Panthers gave so much to get up to pick 1. At pick 2, when Stroud was selected, a decent landing spot. Probably not going to be an amazing team year 1, but they would have high draft capital, get great wide receiver, more draft capital, just build up the offense around Stroud. And now that they trade up to 3 to take Will Anderson, they kind of lost that. So, again, coin flip, pick who you like. I prefer Young. And then at 5, I'm going Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, it's probably sunk in for a lot of people now. But on draft night, it really didn't sink into me just how crazy the draft capital for Gibbs was. I think we were all so caught up in the Lions hate DeAndre Swift. Like, they just despise him. And a lot of the shock over the fact that they took Gibbs that early. But let's just remind ourselves, Jahmyr Gibbs was taken 12 overall in this draft. My main concern with Gibbs coming into the draft, coming into these rookie drafts, was his size. I loved him earlier in this season, early during the collegiate season, because he was dynamic, he catches the ball a ton, and he's a pretty electric player in my opinion. But when he weighed into the combine at his weight, it was a little concerning. There are very few historic running backs that came in sub 200 and performed highly in the NFL. And that was a big drawing point for me until he was drafted 12 overall. And obviously Swift is now out of town. In my eyes, I mean, maybe Montgomery steals some goal line touches. But they took Jahmyr Gibbs with the 12th overall pick. That's higher than they had previously used on Swift. That's higher than Breece Hall was selected. That's higher than Kenneth Walker was selected. And the Lions want to run the ball. They've made that very apparent. I sincerely think that Gibbs could be, I mean, right up next to Bijan at this point. He honestly is a better receiver than Bijan. Probably not, he's definitely not a better pure runner. He doesn't have the size that Bijan has. But if you're sitting on the board at, honestly, even up to 2, if you are in a position where your team is set at quarterback, and I'm talking like very set, I could see, I wouldn't blame you for going as high as 2 on Gibbs. Now that he has that 12th overall draft capital, I mean, his hit rate is just, it skyrockets. Like, that puts him in a tier of prospect that has a preposterous ceiling and pretty rarely misses. So, I mean, I was not that big on Gibbs coming into the draft, but now, I mean, damn. I wouldn't blame you if you put him above the quarterbacks at this point, which is crazy in SuperFlex, I know. But I'm giving it the caveat that if you are just absolutely set, and if you are absolutely set, then just try and trade back a little bit. Get a feel for your draft, where Gibbs is going to go. But, I mean, I think Gibbs is going to be just a cornerstone running back at this point. His size concerns are out the window for me. And then at 6, player I loved, JSN. Kind of in a weird spot. I was very surprised to see him fall this far to 20 in the draft. Most of the buzz we had him as like the clear, definitive wide receiver 1 in this class. Was going to go decently earlier than the rest of the receivers around him. And that didn't happen in the slightest. I mean, we saw wide receivers go just bing, 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 bing. 20 for JSN, 21 for Johnston, 22 for Flowers, and 23 for Addison. Now, obviously, I'm not going to hold that against JSN. And JSN is still, despite the decrease in expected draft capital, in a tier by himself for these wide receivers. I think his production against and with just NFL wide receivers that have dominated as rookies sets him far and apart from these other wide receivers in the class. And I also think that people are slightly overreacting to this Seahawks landing spot. Now, year 1, I understand. Tyler Lockett's there. He's kind of built to be the eventual replacement for Lockett. But I mean, he easily steps right up into the slot instead of Lockett. Lockett is a proven deep threat. So is Metcalf. JSN can easily be the safety valve for Geno this year. And then eventually work up to a more dynamic role when likely Lockett is gone next year. And if Geno continues to be the quarterback we saw last year, we're going to get points, all right? Like, realistically, this landing spot isn't that much worse long-term than the Vikings or the Ravens. QJ is the only one of these 4 wide receivers that has a set-and-forget-it quarterback. You don't have to worry about it. He's set up to be in an offense long-term that's going to throw the ball. Now, we have seen supposedly the Ravens might be trying to pass more with this new offensive coordinator. Maybe. I don't really know. It's a tough bet to take. I mean, these wide receivers are JSN in a tier by himself, and then Addison, QJ, and Flowers. Take them however which way you want. I have them all, well, I actually have Flowers in a tier below, but I honestly think Flowers is almost assuredly going after JSN, Addison, and QJ, and I kind of think he's a decent value at 9. If the Ravens really turn around and become that more pass-happy offense, he's going to be a target. Odell isn't going to be here forever. We really haven't seen much of anything out of Rashad Bateman yet. Obviously, Mark Andrews is always going to be there, but Flowers can easily become the wide receiver 1 in this offense. So while I do have him in a tier below the other 3, I think if you can get it cheap because people don't want to take Flowers, I think he's a great value at 9. And obviously with Addison, love the landing spot. He doesn't have to be the alpha in this offense. Jeff will do it. He's just going to get solid targets. I also love Addison as a prospect. With QJ, I am slightly worried. He just becomes Mike Williams 2.0. Just a big body field stretcher for the Chargers offense. And they eventually draft another Keenan Allen that'll be more of the target hog. But thinking like that, where is that going to get us? Let's be honest. Quentin Johnson is not Mike Williams. Regardless of whether you think he'll end up having a similar career trajectory or not, he's a first-round receiver with, arguably the highest potential in this wide receiver group. Take him in any way you want. I go JSN, Addison, QJ, Flowers. After that, we have a significant tier drop. And this is really where we start to have a lot of differentiation among people in where they're going to go in this class. I, personally, at 10, am going Levis. QB scarcity has to push him up the board. 33rd overall isn't ideal. Far from it for a quarterback we thought was maybe going to go top 10. And it also puts him on a much shorter leash than the other quarterbacks in this class, the top ones have. They're going to be able to fail consistently because the team has invested so much draft capital in them. If Will Levis becomes the starting quarterback of the Titans and fails, he will not be given many second chances. That said, if somehow Levis steps into the starting role this season, he doesn't have to do too much to win the staff's trust. He can lean on Derrick Henry. He has Treylon Burks. He has Chig. Obviously, this isn't an offense loaded with weapons, but the Titans are going to be a run-first team this year. Next year, who knows? There were rumors about Henry being traded this offseason. Who knows what happens next season? But QB scarcity has to pump Levis, despite the second-round draft capital, above the rest of these prospects, simply because tight ends usually do not increase in value after year 1. And the rest of the running back and wide receivers in this class it's tough. Let's just leave it at that. Now, important point here. I did just say tight ends do not increase from year 1 to year 2. That said, Dalton Kincaid is probably the safest tight end prospect in this class because he is tied to Josh Allen. Regardless of what he does year 1. At this point, everybody in Dynasty knows that tight ends aren't a great rookie draft investment. People don't expect them to do massive things year 1. If you still are, get your head checked. I don't know. But because Kincaid is tied to Josh Allen in an offense that doesn't really have standout wide receivers apart from Diggs, Gabe Davis is, he's a big play threat, but for fantasy purposes, he's not a target hog. And Diggs is getting older. They really don't have a player behind Diggs that is going to step up and be that guy for Josh Allen. Dalton Kincaid can eventually become that guy. And because he's always going to be tied to Josh Allen, he's going to consistently have value year over year because people are going to be like, all right, well, this might be the year he finally breaks out. And compared to the people behind him, that upside is worth a lot more to me. And the security of still having your league mates likely be interested in Kincaid makes the pick safer. Which takes us to number 12, which is Zach Charbonnet. Now with Charbonnet, I loved him as a prospect coming into this draft. Absolutely loved him. And now he's in potentially the worst landing spot, right next to Kenneth Walker with the Seahawks. Now, since I've just said that, you might be thinking, well, then why do you have him at 12? If you hate this landing spot so much, why isn't Charbonnet lower? And that's because I don't know what the fuck to do. He got drafted 52 overall. Kenneth Walker was drafted, 41. He got essentially the same draft capital as Kenneth Walker. And now I can't see into the future, but this has to be an indicator of something. It has to be. They either don't trust Walker to handle the full workload, they don't think he's as good of a running back as the Dynasty community does. At the least, there is one indicator that I can give you for a fact, and that's that Kenneth Walker will not be catching any passes in this offense. That is the one great thing about Charbonnet, is that he had a great receiving production profile while still being a bigger back. So if Kenneth Walker gets hurt again, Charbonnet can easily step into a 3-down role. And in this Seahawks offense that wants to run the ball, I mean, that ceiling's got to be crazy. If Kenneth Walker doesn't get hurt, Charbonnet is probably still at low-end RB2 because he's going to get all the receiving work out of the backfield. It's such a weird landing spot, but I have to just look at this draft capital and say the Seahawks know something that I don't. That's all I can do. Because when we look at the running back that I have behind Charbonnet, Devon Achane, hope I pronounced that right, he landed in the best landing spot for a running back this draft class, the Miami Dolphins. And similar to Gibbs, what happened in the draft for him eliminates my biggest problem, his size. Because the Dolphins are likely going to use Achane in a great way, for lack of a better thing to say there. They will find ways to use him. Now, obviously, the draft capital, 84 isn't bad. It's really tough with this class to reset your mind after seeing Bijan and Gibbs go that high. Like, let me look up what Rachaad White's draft capital was last year. Rachaad White was drafted with the 91st overall pick. And in most rookie drafts, he was going pretty damn high. We have to remember how good 52 overall, 84 overall are for a running back. Like, that is solid draft capital. And with the Dolphins, they ain't got shit in that backfield. So the main reason that I have Charbonnet above Achane, despite the stark difference in landing spot, is because Achane never becomes a full 3-down workhorse. Charbonnet has that potential route. If for some reason the Seahawks, like we just saw with the Lions, if Walker is the Seahawks Swift, Charbonnet has the build the receiving ability to be dominant as a fantasy option. A chain's lack of size severely limits that. He will never be an RB1, I don't think. He just won't get the volume. That said, you could have said the same thing about Eckler. Year after year. He's small. He's mainly a receiving threat. He's not a fantastic runner. There are much better running backs in this league at just pure running. But Eckler's efficiency with his touches propels him into an RB1, despite the fact that his touches aren't amazing compared to other running backs. So again, I have to go 50-50 on this. If you want to go to the better landing spot, take a chain. I still feel like it's got to be Charbonnet, even though I hate this landing spot. Because I don't see a world where a chain becomes a league breaker. He'll be solid. He's likely a safer pick, potentially, because the Dolphins will utilize him. He will get a lot of passing down work. But as we keep going through this class, it's some very tough decisions that you're going to have to make when you're on the clock. Now, arguably one of my favorite players in this class is Marvin Mims. I have him at the top of this next tier, 14 overall in your rookie drafts. I loved Mims as a prospect. Early breakout, very electric player, great production profile. He's only 21. Now, he does land with the Broncos, which is slightly weird. Because you might initially think, well, this is kind of a crowded room. But the Broncos were shipping around Jerry Jeudy. They were fielding offers for Courtland Sutherland. This is the first wide receiver that Sean Payton has drafted for this team. He ain't going anywhere. And I love him as a prospect. Currently on Sleeper ADP, he would be about the 20th player in your rookie drafts. I have him ranked 6 spots ahead of that. If you can get him there, he's the steal of the draft. I think as we get closer and closer to most people's rookie drafts, that's likely going to keep tuning up. He's going to keep moving closer to the early second. But damn, I love Mims. I really think, again, this is a better spot than people want to give it credit for. Sean Payton will likely turn this offense around. They still have Russell Wilson. Courtland Sutton's getting old. Who knows what happens to him next year? Mims could be the wide receiver 2, challenging Jerry Jeudy to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense. That's how talented I think he is. So I love him in this draft. I think he's one of the best values. Now, similar, I think Jonathan Mingo, who went to the Panthers at pick 39, is very interesting. He did not do much in college. He was drafted mainly for his athletic prowess. Deem him a project. Say whatever you want. He is in one of the most depleted wide receiver rooms in football right now. He is tied to the number 1 overall pick in this draft class. The Panthers do not have the draft capital to get a top wide receiver in this next draft. Jonathan Mingo is in an amazing position. And you know what other Ole Miss wide receiver didn't do a lot production-wise in college? DK Metcalf. Now, Mingo is not the athlete that Metcalf was. Far from it. But realistically, at a certain point, I have to say, fuck what he did in college. He has massive opportunity. Massive opportunity. And to be honest with you, I don't see how you could take some of these other players above him because of the limitations that their profiles have. So let's get into some of those. The other 3 players I have in this tier are Kendre Miller at 16 overall, Jayden Reed at 17 overall, and Josh Downs at 18 overall. Now, some of you might be surprised to hear Jayden Reed that high. Looking at Sleeper ADP right now, he's about 25 overall. I have him at 17. Jayden Reed was another wide receiver that I really liked. He was an early breakout. The problem is that he was a late declare. It's usually never good. Never. But I think Jayden Reed is dynamic. I also think he went into another landing spot that people should be looking on more favorably. Christian Watson will be the alpha wide receiver in this offense. He will stretch the field a lot more often. I don't know if Jordan Love has the Aaron Rodgers arm for that to pay off for Christian Watson as much as it did last year. Romeo Doubs is He had a good fantasy year last year, but I don't think he's a major threat to be a target hog in this offense. There is potential for Jayden Reed to become the most targeted wide receiver in this offense, simply because of the routes he's going to run. Watson will probably draw more attention. He will be the field stretcher. He'll be the deep threat. I don't know if I trust Jordan Love to hit Watson consistently. So I expect him to probably lean on Reed more. So that's why I have him this high. Again, I think if you can get him at 25 in your draft, amazing value. Great steal, especially when the Packers took him 50 overall. Now, before we move on to Downs, let's go back up to 16 and talk about Kendre Miller. Now, again, 71 overall is great draft capital, especially in a running back room that is depleted right now. This is potentially Kamara's last year with the Saints. Kendre Miller is a 21-year-old running back, but he's not going to catch passes. That's the biggest problem. You can subscribe to the argument that because Kendre Miller is 21 years old, the youngest running back in this class, that he could develop into a decent enough pass catcher out of the backfield. But that is a bet that fails most of the time. So even though I expect Kendre Miller to likely be the running back 1 for the Saints next season, I think his upside is limited by the fact that he's just a pure runner. That said, Kenneth Walker was a pure runner. Obviously got better draft capital than Kendre Miller did. But volume is king in fantasy football. I wouldn't blame you if you took Kendre Miller higher than this in your actual drafts because of running back scarcity. But I would likely prefer the other people I have above him simply because Kendre Miller doesn't have that elite upside. Now that said, let's go to one of my favorite players in this class, which really broke my heart. Josh Downs. I loved Downs coming into this draft. Problem is, he went a lot later than I was expecting. 79 overall is still good capital. It beats out the 100 overall benchmark that a lot of people have for draft capital. But a lot of people are concerned about this landing spot, which I totally get. Anthony Richardson is not a proven passer. And even though I have him ranked as the 2nd overall player in this rookie draft, this rookie class, it's because of his rushing ability, not because of his passing ability. So when you look immediately at this landing spot, you're like, oof. Hard to bet on Josh Downs when you don't really want to make the bet on this quarterback being an efficient passer. But here's the thing. I'm more worried about Anthony Richardson's passing chops when it comes to a player like Alec Pierce, when it comes to a player like Michael Pittman. Downs will be the safety valve. Like, Downs will likely have the routes that are easiest for Richardson to hit. And on top of that, Downs had one of the best production profiles in this wide receiver class. His biggest knock was his size. Doesn't really matter so much to me because the NFL is changing. He'll be a slot wide receiver, which for fantasy football is usually good. Slot wide receivers get peppered, easy points in PPR formats. So while I have Downs at 18, he's another one I wouldn't mind if you pushed him up slightly. I really think 18 is probably the sweet spot. That's where he currently is on Sleeper. Just because, don't get me wrong, I understand the Anthony Richardson concerns. But take those down slightly because of the role that Downs is going to play in this offense. Then the next tier by himself, I have Roschon Johnson. Another player I really liked coming into the draft that kind of hurt me. Draft capital really wasn't amazing. Pretty tough. But he lands on the Chicago Bears. A team that has a climbable depth chart. Now, this depth chart is not nearly as open as it was for the player I'm going to mention from last year's class. But Dameon Pierce was selected 107 overall. Roschon Johnson taken 115. Obviously, there was nobody in that Texans backfield. Pierce just had to walk in the building and become the RB1. But that's what this situation is reminiscent of for me. A running back whose draft capital really was far from ideal, but there's great opportunity in this offense. Obviously, Fields will steal some rushing TDs, but with Roschon Johnson, he's another player can take a 3-down workload. I think a lot of people don't really appreciate how good he was while being behind Bijan Robinson. And yes, Khalil Herbert has a lot of stats to prop up and say he'll be a great running back leading this team. But that is not a guarantee. So I think if you're going to roll the dice and really shoot for the massive upside, this is the late round running back target I would have. Again, I have him at 19, about 5 spots higher than his current sleeper ADP in rookie drafts. And now people might be thinking, you had Dalton Kincaid so high. Where are the rest of these tight ends that still got great capital? I got them right here, all in the same tier. Again, the only reason that I had Kincaid that high was because his value should be steady paired up with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in an offense that doesn't have a ton of weapons for him to hit in the long term. Michael Mayer is in a similar situation target volume-wise, but he does not have the quarterback to support his value long term, at least in terms of your league mates' view of the player. Similar thing for Laporta. There are a lot of people that love Laporta, but he's in arguably the worst spot. There is a ton of target competition in this Lions offense. Also on a team that wants to run the ball. Don't get me wrong, it worked out for TJ Hawkinson while he was there. But again, tight ends do not retain value usually year over year. So if you like one of these prospects, go ahead and get them. But the reason I have them this low is because they're risky assets to have as rookies. It's just as simple as that. It's pretty much the same exact story with Musgrave. Next, 23, I have Tank Bigsby. Decent capital going 88 overall to the Jaguars. And again, this is really a puzzling situation for Dynasty. Obviously, Etienne had his Liz Frank injury his rookie year. Seemed fine last year. I don't expect him to get hurt again. If he does, though, Tank Bigsby is another player that can take all 3 downs. He has the size and the receiving chops to take all 3 downs in this offense. What I see likely happening is Tank taking goal line work away from Etienne. Kind of just being a spell running back. Maybe he has occasional RB2 value, but he's kind of just a handcuff to me. I really don't know what to think. Peterson might be trying to split this in more of a committee than I want to give it credit for, but that's not something I'm really excited for in my rookie draft. Next, Tyjae Spears. Much lower than current sleeper ADP. He's 15 on there. I have him ranked 24. The dude has no ACL. None. No ACLs for this guy. He's got none. No ACLs. What am I supposed to do with that information? I don't know. Derrick Henry, talked about it earlier. I don't know what his long-term, I don't know what the Titans' long-term plan is with Henry. Tyjae Spears could be the RB1 come next year for the Titans. But he has no freaking ACLs. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what to make of that. How does he have no ACLs? I don't know. But again, am I really going to be super excited for the running back that has no ACLs? Like how is that a pick that I'm going to be, woo, lucky me, I got the guy with no ACL. I don't know what to do with that. Next, Rashee Rice. I think Rice is probably going to go much higher than this in most rookie drafts. I will not be paying that price. Currently 17 on Sleeper. I think that'll probably keep climbing because he's tied to Patrick Mahomes. Now you might be saying, well, Derek, you love Dalton Kincaid. Loved him because he's tied to an amazing quarterback in the NFL. Rashee Rice is similarly tied to an amazing quarterback in the NFL. Arguably the best quarterback. Most likely the best quarterback. I just don't like him as a prospect. And I think more likely than not, Rashee Rice just eventually takes over the MVS role in this offense. It's not a role that's generated a lot of fantasy value. Rashee Rice was a late declare. He did not have an early breakout like Jaden Reed did. His production profile is not something to really be impressed by. So even though he's going to a great offense with the Kansas City Chiefs, I really don't see how I'm going to be super excited about him, especially at the price point that he's likely going to be going in your rookie drafts. Now after that, in another tier entirely, you can probably throw him in the same tier. Hendon Hooker. Goes to the Lions, 68 overall. I originally thought I was going to love Hooker. Just because I viewed him as maybe late round 1, potential value pick. Just because people are going to be so excited about those top quarterbacks in the draft that they might not be giving Hooker the credit that he gets for getting first round draft capital. Then he went in the 3rd round to the Lions. Jared Goff's been playing good for the Lions. Don't really see a situation where the Lions staff looks at how Goff's performing and is like, all right, we got to pull this guy. He hasn't really shown that in his time there, that he's that piss poor. But it could happen. I don't know. It's just not a bet I'm willing to take. And again, Hooker, even worse capital than Levis. If he somehow gets that starting job and fails, see you later. Team will not care. They'll bench his ass quick. So I can't see myself investing in a third-round quarterback. The leash is so much shorter, and the hit rate on third-round quarterbacks is so much worse that I can't see it happening. I really can't see being a big fan of him. That said, I have him similarly valued to Sleeper right now. Actually, I have him one spot higher. And that's predominantly because if he somehow does step into the starting quarterback role in this offense, he's surrounded by a lot of talent. He will be put in a position to succeed with this offense. It's just a question of whether he does it or not. Next with Jalen Hyatt, I have him 4 spots lower than current Sleeper ADP. My problem with Hyatt is that I worry about him becoming a field stretcher. The Giants have no field stretching option in this offense right now, which is why that concerns me so much. I'm all for the idea that Jalen Hyatt is kind of stepping into the wide receiver 1 role in this offense, because they ain't got jack shit in their wide receiver room. But even less than the talent they have is the vertical threats. I mean, Slayton, I guess. But it feels to me like Hyatt's going to become the vertical option in this Giants offense, which worries me because he's likely going to be the field stretcher. If anything, what this pick does for me is puts me back on Wan'Dale Robinson, who I loved last year. He's probably going to be the target hog. Hyatt feels risky to me because of how his talents align and what the Giants lack in their wide receiver room. Right behind him at 28, I have his teammate, Cedric Tillman. Now, Tillman, kind of a similar profile to Michael Wilson, who I have directly after him. Both players could not stay healthy. Wilson, on the other hand, though, did have sort of a breakout. I can't remember if Tillman had a freshman year breakout or not. Regardless, both could not stay healthy, which is why they were late declares. Unlike Rashee Rice, who I'm really kind of downgrading because he's a late declare, I'm willing to view the context for Tillman and the context for Wilson and say, okay, they got injured. They kept getting injured. That's why they were late declares. Still isn't a fantastic thing because I don't really want an injury-prone wide receiver, but there's a reason for their late declare. And Tillman at the Browns, decent landing spot. Potential to become the wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2, maybe even the 1 if Cooper were to be gonzo in the future. But I don't really love him that much more or less than consensus. I think 28 is pretty fair for him. But with Michael Wilson, he's currently ranked 39 on Sleeper. And to me, he's almost the same prospect as Cedric Tillman. Slightly worse draft capital, 74 compared to 94. But with the Cardinals, they're probably a better landing spot. Hopkins is going to be gone. Who's the Cardinals' major guy at wide receiver? Marquise Brown, who is a field stretching option. Now, unlike, kind of the problem I'm having with all these other field stretchers, I think Kyler Murray can hit that deep threat. because he's able to move around in the pocket, extend the play, eventually hit them. So I still like Marquise Brown. But Wilson doesn't have to be that field stretcher like Hyatt does, because they already have one. So that's why I have him so much higher than consensus right now. And he's likely my favorite late second, early third draft pick. Right after him, we have Chase Brown, who got really bad capital. 163. But again, steps into a running back room that doesn't have much. Who knows what's going to happen with Joe Mixon, especially after this season. And Chase Brown had a great profile. He can catch the ball. He had great production. And likely, because he's on the Bengals, he's going to go higher than this in your rookie drafts. Some of them. But 163 overall is not something I'm willing to bet on. I'm happy taking the guys that go up to, let's say, 120. But the drop-off in hit rate for players that don't go in the top 100 is real. It's very real. Most of the players that we talk about past this point were not drafted in the top 100. Keep that in mind as we talk about them. Now, one player that got horrible draft capital, but I'm willing to bet on, is Kayshon Boutte. Again, similarly ranked to sleeper ADP, 31 overall. With Boutte, I think a lot of the slide was because of his off-the-field concerns. A lot of shit went down at LSU concerning him. Kayshon Boutte also had a freshman year breakout and is an early declare at 21 years old. And he's going to a team doesn't have a ton of wide receiver talent apart from Juju Smith-Schuster. Boutte's profile is great. The draft capital wasn't. At this point, we are entering the pure dart throws in the draft. We've likely already entered that area for a decent chunk. Boutte has a lot of upside considering his early breakout, early declare, going to a team that doesn't have a ton of competition. While I don't have him that much higher than a sleeper ADP, he is a target that I really like in your rookie drafts. Now, a target that I don't really like, despite having him higher than sleeper ADP, is Tank Dell. Currently 43 on sleeper, I have him at 32. That is not an indication of me liking him, however. I think it's more so an indication of sleeper ADP not having yet adjusted to the draft capital we've seen. People were not likely expecting Tank Dell to go 69 overall to the Rams. And even despite that, Tank Dell is, again, not a player I'm really excited for. Tank Dell is basically Rashee Rice to me, but without Patrick Mahomes. In terms of their production profile, not them as players. You already heard why I don't like Rashee Rice. And that was with being attached to Patrick Mahomes. Tank Dell does not have that benefit. Simple as that. Next one would be Trey Tucker, who went pick 100 to the Raiders. Again, another player that I have higher than sleeper ADP at 45 overall. I have him at 33 overall. And again, this isn't much of an indication of me loving him so much as it is an indication of sleeper ADP not having yet adjusted. This is ADP as of May 1st. That said, Trey Tucker he narrowly got that top 100. Not that it's really that clear of a cutoff. But he goes to the Raiders. He likely steps into a slot role. It's not a bad pick. He's not a pick that excites me a ton. But at this point in the draft, there are not going to be a lot of picks that excite you a ton. So I still think Trey Tucker is probably one of the better bets at this point of the draft. There are very few people at this stage that are going to give you a ton. So I'm fine with people leaning on Trey Tucker, who got the draft capital, unlike the rest of these wide receivers we're going to talk about, and has a decent chance to maybe see the field. Who knows what happens with Renfrow long term. Keep in mind, though, that Tucker will likely not be a player that's going to do a ton year one. Now next, we have Izzy Abanikanda, 143 overall to the Jets. He's behind Breece Hall. I mean, maybe. I don't even want to say it because I have Breece Hall in Dynasty. Maybe Breece Hall is not the running back he was anymore after the ACL injury. I doubt that. Nowadays, ACLs aren't as, shock and awe end of career. I loved Izzy because I'm a Pitt fan. But this is just a bad running back room to enter. Simple as that. Breece Hall and Michael Carter. It's tough. Now, a player that I have significantly higher than sleeper ADP. His current sleeper ADP for startups is 999. He's not even on the radar, which makes him a great 5th round pick in your rookie drafts, even though I have him ranked at 35. If you can sneak this guy either as a pickup after the draft or in your 5th round, I love it. Just understand that he is not going to do anything year one. And that's Charlie Jones. Went to the Bengals at pick 131. And I believe he's going to be the eventual replacement to Tyler Boyd. I don't think Tyler Boyd stays with the Bengals long term because of their likely cap restrictions. They won't be able to pay him. I don't see them scrounging up the cash for it. Which leaves the slot option for the Bengals open. And we've seen that slot option for the Bengals can prove to provide some value for dynasty managers. Charlie Jones won't do anything year one. But year two, he might step into the slot role for the Bengals and provide you some decent depth wide receiver production. Simple as that. Now next, again, another guy I have higher than current sleeper ADP, but it's because it hasn't adjusted. Stetson Bennett, 128 overall to the Rams. Now the reason I do have Stetson Bennett higher is not only the fact that sleeper ADP hasn't adjusted, but it's the fact that Stafford's old. We saw a lot of wear and tear last year. I am not going to be betting heavily on Stetson Bennett to be a great quarterback in the NFL. But he had a ton of success at Georgia. Probably because he was 26 years old playing 19-year-olds. But hey, if he steps into the Rams offense, that's points. And I don't really know what's going to go on with Stafford long term. Realistically, Bennett will probably not be anything. But that context for him is really what the dart throw is based on. Similarly, we have Josh Shorter, 150 overall to the Bills. A player that will probably never be anything amazing. But I explained a lot earlier how the Bills don't really have much in their wide receiver room. I'm not going to sit here and bang the drum and say Josh Shorter is going to be amazing. But I don't know much about the guy. And if he climbs the Bills depth chart, it can be valuable. That's really all I got for him. Now with Evan Hall, another running back prospect that was getting a ton of love prior to the draft because of his production profile, the fact that he had the size and the ability to pass catch in this offense. Until he went 176 overall to the Colts. Now with all of this said, Hall can step into the 3-down role if Jonathan Taylor gets hurt. We saw how valuable that was for Deion Jackson on the Colts. Hull will probably be never anything more than a premium handcuff in Dynasty. But he'll sure as hell be a premium handcuff in Dynasty. I'm fine with you doing that in your late fourth. Now, just to round out the end of this, I have the rest of the tight ends that got above 100 capital and can actually catch a ball. Those being Darnell Washington, 93 overall to the Steelers, Brenton Strange, 61 overall to the Jaguars, and Tucker Kraft, 78 overall to the Packers. Now, while I said these guys can catch, they're not really known for being great receivers like the prospects above them in these rankings. That said, they are also not Luke Schoonmaker, who went to the Cowboys and will probably never be anything more than a blocking tight end. So again, if you like him, go for it. But Darnell Washington is probably going to be behind Pat Freiermuth in terms of pass catching for his career. I don't really see the Steelers letting Freiermuth go. He seems like a player that they really like and want to be on the team long term. Brenton Strange, I mean, maybe he's the successor, but he wasn't really known as an amazing pass catcher. Now with Tucker Kraft, we already saw Musgrave, who is the clear better pass catcher, better athlete, likely the better receiver from the tight end position for the Packers go. Maybe there's a chance that the Packers can support 2 tight ends. I'm not willing to bet on that. Now, if you would like to go through and see the rest of these rankings, which are just basically going to be priority ads, maybe 5th round picks in your Dynasty League, I will link my rankings in the video below if you want to check it out. But if we're being honest, those are just straight up dart throws. So really, I'd tell you to trust your heart. If there is someone that I didn't mention that you like as a late round dart throw, just go out and get them. There isn't much of a science past the 3rd round in this draft. Trust your heart and go with your guys. I hope you guys liked the video. I hope I gave a ton of context for you for your rookie drafts. Now the only thing left to do is go out and crush them. Thank you.